What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today we're going to be talking about the Portland Trailblazers. There's been no team that's been more active this offseason than Portland, and it all started, of course, with Damian Lillard's trade request a few months back, which caused a lot of unnecessary drama and a couple months of just waiting for something to happen. But last week, we finally saw the deal go down, with Damian Lillard being traded to the Milwaukee Bucks, and in exchange for him, Nas Little and Yusuf Nurkic in that three-team deal between Portland, Milwaukee, and Phoenix, the Blazers received DeAndre Ayton, Mooney Camara, Drew Holiday, a 2029 first-round pick from the Bucks, and 2 pick swaps with the Bucks in 2028 and 2030. Then just days later, they again made another big-time deal, flipping Drew Holiday over to the Boston Celtics in exchange for Malcolm Brogdon, Robert Williams, a 2024 Warriors first-round pick, and a 2029 Celtics first-round pick as well. It was a massive few days in the NBA, especially for Portland. And of course, everybody's talking about Milwaukee and Boston and how those deals are going to drastically shift the title contention picture this season. But it's of course a big deal for the Blazers too, finally trading away one of the best players in franchise history in Dame and setting themselves up for a rebuild for the first time in what honestly feels like forever. And it's an exciting start to the rebuild. Originally, when the trade happened, I feel like a lot of people unfairly ridiculed the Blazers for not taking the Heat's package, which could have included a multitude of first-round picks, pick swaps, maybe young talents like Nikola Jovic and Jaime Jaquez, and maybe eventually they will end up regretting that. But from the get-go, I like the idea of them getting Drew to flip. I like the idea of them getting DeAndre Ayton, and after they flipped Drew, I feel like they got an incredible return for Dame and ultimately have set themselves up beautifully to have a really bright future ahead of them, not only through those deals, but also with the young talent that was already in place going into this offseason. Typically, when we see teams trade superstar players, it takes those teams a long time to get back to championship contention, to even become a playoff team again. But for the Blazers, they're probably only a few years away, and I think if the talent progresses the way that I believe it can, we could see the Blazers a force at the top of the Western Conference a lot sooner than a lot of people may expect. So let's go ahead and talk about why I'm so excited for the Blazers, not just in the future, but also now, how special some of their young talents are, and ultimately, why this young core is one of the best in the league. To start things off, let's talk about the guys that have already been here for a little bit at this point. The first guy is Anthony Simons, who was Dame's backcourt mate over the past few seasons after they traded away longtime shooting guard CJ McCollum. And Anthony Simons had the best year of his career last season, and on a lot of nights was their second best player alongside Dame. Statistically, Simons put up 21.2 points per game, 2.6 rebounds, 4.1 assists on 47.7% shooting from the field and 37.7% from three. He's already become one of the premier perimeter shooters in this entire league, last season shooting 9.1 threes per game, which was the 5th most in the league, and he shot better from three than guys like Jason Tatum, Luka Doncic, Anthony Edwards, who all also took a good number of threes. In fact, he shot better than Damian Lillard last season from deep. Of course, Dame shot on 2 more attempts per game, but even still, the fact that it's close speaks to how good Simons was from the outside last season. He's an electric threat when he gets the ball behind the arc. He can knock them down with ease, whether he's on the move, he's curling around a screen, catch and shoot, creating for himself. At the logo, Simons can shoot it from basically anywhere when he crosses half court, and that's big for him, especially when it's combined with his elite athleticism. As you probably already know, Simons is one of the league's best young dunkers. He was in a dunk contest. He was a dunk contest champion. He is extremely explosive. If you close out him off the catch, which you have to do because Simons can hit that from anywhere, he's able to blow right past you and slam on someone at the rim or finish at a high level, just create shots for others. It's a very unique combination of skills. And now with Dame gone, I fully expect Simons to step into the role as the number 1 option for the Blazers this upcoming season. That's a role that he might struggle with at first consistently because he doesn't have a 30-point per game guy like Dame next to him anymore. But I think as time goes on, Simons is going to fit pretty comfortably into that spot and eventually will end up averaging around 25 points per game this season and be firmly in a lot of people's most improved player talks. I think Simons is going to be really good and often gets forgotten about when we talk about this young core, but he's great. He's an integral part to what they're building, and I think he's absolutely capable of being their shooting guard of the future. While we're on the topic of elite athletes, let's talk about Shaden Sharp next. He entered the league last season as one of the NBA's youngest rookies, but was still able to carve out a somewhat sizable role on a team in the Blazers that were trying to make the playoffs. Of course, they didn't end up doing so, but that was the goal from the very beginning. And if you take a look at his rookie stats, he was pretty solid. He put up 9.9 points per game, 3 rebounds, and 1.2 assists, while shooting 47.2% from the field, 36% from deep, and 71.4% from the line. It's nothing too crazy, but again, for a really young rookie that didn't get a ton of run throughout the season, these are pretty good numbers. And it's made even better when you take into account what he did in the last 10 games of the season. This was the point where Dame really stopped playing. They sat him down to try and tank for a better draft pick, which worked out. They got Scoot Henderson. But over those last 10 games while Dame was sitting, Shaden really stepped up into a premier role, and he thrived when he did so. Over those 10 games, he put up 23.7 points per game, 6.1 rebounds, and 4.1 assists, while shooting better from 3 and the line and roughly the same from the field. He was really impressive over this stretch, and to me, it's a very promising glimpse into what Shaden can become as he gets a more expanded role and polishes his game overall. And that's one thing that I was really impressed with Shaden over the course of the season. He was a lot more polished than I expected him to be. Obviously, he was still raw in quite a number of areas, but for a guy that didn't play a single second of college ball before coming into the NBA, he was a lot more polished than I was expecting, which allowed him to become a staple of that Portland rotation and eventually get that opportunity at the end of the season to show what he's made of and what he can be down the line. I was especially impressed with his three-point shot, knocking down looks at a pretty high rate compared to some of his peers. Amongst all rookies that shot at least 3 threes a game last season, Sharp ranked 6th in three-point percentage. He got a lot of catch and shoot looks, and he was great in that regard, an area that he's going to continue to have to thrive in to play alongside Anthony Simons and a guy like Scoot Henderson. Also, like Simons, he has a ton of bounce too and is one of the most fun dunkers in the game. This unique combination of explosiveness and solid three-point shooting, like Simons, makes him incredibly interesting as a player. He also showed some interesting flashes of being a solid perimeter defender. He wasn't great, but was solid, especially for a rookie, and has the athletic tools, in my opinion, to hold up really well on that end of the floor as his career continues. Like Simons, I think Sharp is going to get a ton of opportunities this year and make the most out of him. He's another guy that I think could be in some most improved player talks. Now, second-year players typically don't win that award, especially not guys who were top 10 picks, but he's going to be amongst the most improved players from last year's draft class this upcoming season, in my opinion. Rounding out this young big three of sorts, we've got Scoot Henderson. I've said before in this channel, and I'm going to say it again, I think he's going to be extremely, extremely special in this league. Eventually, he'll be one of the best guards in the entire association. He'll be an all-star sooner than later, an all-NBA guy sooner than later. Scoot's going to be really, really good. And he showcased a lot of reasons why I expect he's going to be so all throughout his time in the G League and in the very limited summer league run that he did have this past summer. He unfortunately wasn't able to play much due to an ankle injury, I think it was, or it might have been a shoulder, one of the two. But when Scoot was out there, he was phenomenal. He's a blur when he attacks the basket / in transition. He's one of the fastest guys in the league probably from day one, and that combined with an underrated handle is going to make him nearly impossible to stop when trying to attack the rim. He's also got great vision, which is going to pair well with guys who can knock down outside shots like Simons and Shaden Sharp, who he's going to play alongside for a long time probably in this young core. He's going to be a monster when driving and kicking because you've got to commit to stopping Scoot or he's going to dunk on you or finish because he's also a very creative finisher. And if you collapse on him, he's just going to find the shooter with ease. He's going to be dynamic as a playmaker, as a scorer. He will be special. Really, the only main weakness for Scoot at this point is his shot. He's not a great three-point shooter, shot around 30% from 3 in the G League last season, but the shot does look solid, and there were stretches where he hit at a high level. He's just got to kind of build that consistency, and I trust that he will. I don't know if he'll ever become one of the league's knockdown three-point guys, which if he does, I don't know how you stop him at that point, but at the very least, he's going to become serviceable, and that'll be plenty enough to make him incredibly dangerous. Scoot's also got some really good physical tools, which in my opinion will eventually make him a pretty good perimeter defender. He's just an incredible talent, and having him, Shaden, and Simons to start your rebuild as your young core is amazing. Those are 3 really, really entertaining young players that I believe all have incredibly high ceilings. They are one of the most electric groupings in terms of athleticism that you'll find over the course of the entire league. Shaden and Simons are both capable of winning dunk contest after dunk contest. Scoot could get there at some point too. He's electrically fast, like you blink and suddenly he's at the basket. This young core is just going to be really fun to watch, not just this season as they begin to find chemistry with each other, but especially down the line as they continue to grow alongside each other and become the great players I think eventually they'll all be. They've also got guys like Chris Murray, who's a good shooter. There's also guys like Chris Murray, who's a good shooter coming out of Iowa, who's going to be a perimeter threat from the jump and could improve to be a really solid role player for this team for a while. They've got Ryan Rupert, who's a raw prospect coming out of the NBL. He's 6'7" with a 7'3" wingspan, elite physical tools, which could seemingly turn him into a great defender that would fit well alongside those other young players. He showed good ability to get to the rim in the NBL last year, but didn't finish a lot. He's not great offensively. Both the shot and the finishing need some work, but he did show stretches where he could knock down threes consistently, especially before a wrist injury somewhat derailed his three-point percentage. He's a raw prospect. It's going to take him some years to develop, but again, this rebuild is just starting, and if they hit on him, that'll be a big win for the Blazers. There's also Matisse Thybulle, who's a bit older than some of these guys at 26, but he's still somewhat young, has already been an all-defensive caliber guy as a perimeter defender, and he actually shot 38.8% from three last year, which is way better than we've ever seen from Matisse. If he can knock down those threes consistently, he's a huge plus for them as not just a defender, but someone who can actually stay on the court because he can be an outside threat too. Then we have the new guys, the guys that came over in this trade that I also believe are going to make this court even better. There's DeAndre Ayton, who is a former first overall pick, who didn't live up to some of the hype in Phoenix, but was still good. In my opinion, Ayton has gotten kind of underrated by a number of people. He has been a double-double guy every single season, including averaging 18 and 10 this past year, literally on the dot. He was also an integral part in the Suns making the finals in 2021, and in them winning a franchise record number of games in 2022. He's shown at times that he can be a good defensive anchor, an interior threat, and has shown the ability to step outside and knock down a three here and there, while also being somewhat reliable in the mid-range. Really, the biggest question about him is his motor, and yeah, it was a problem in Phoenix, especially towards the end of this past season. It waned at times, but I think in a new situation in Portland, we're going to see a rejuvenated and better than maybe ever DeAndre Ayton. He was asked about the Phoenix situation at Media Day, and he alluded to the fact that he might have requested a trade. He talked about the Suns trading him and quote-unquote honoring his wishes, so it seems like he wanted out of Phoenix, which we kind of knew last season when he tried to sign with the Pacers, but of course Phoenix matched his offer sheet. Like for years, it felt like Ayton and Phoenix were kind of having a falling out, and now he's in a new situation where he seems really happy to be. He was hype at the press conference talking about how he's dominating and how he's going to come out and be a new player for them. He looked really excited in that first video the Blazers posted of him checking out the practice facility. This seems like a rejuvenated DeAndre Ayton, and maybe I'm buying into the hype too much, but I really think he can have the best season of his career this season, be a 20 and 10 guy, and eventually be the Blazers' long-term center. I'm still a believer. He's just 25 years old, still a few years away from most guys hit their prime. I'm going to be a believer in Ayton this season. I'm really excited to see what he can do and hopeful that this is a new start that really refreshes his career. But Ayton isn't the only young big that they picked up in these deals. They also got Robert Williams, who is such a huge snag for them in my opinion. Back in 2022 when Marcus Smart won Defensive Player of the Year, prior to his injury, Robert Williams was the favorite for that award, and if you ask me, he would have won it if he didn't get hurt. He was that impactful on the defensive end for Boston, and he's been consistently one of the best defensive bigs in the league over the past few years. He can block shots, great at contesting, a high-level athlete, a great lob threat, a play finisher who can grab offensive boards by the dozens. He shot over 70% from the field every year of his career. He's really good. I think he's underrated by a lot of people. Robert Williams is great, and he's still young too. He's just 25 years old, and I believe he's got room to improve. Now, he has been injury prone over the course of his career, which is the biggest concern, and in my opinion is probably part of why Boston was willing to part ways with him for Jrue Holiday. But if he can stay healthy, he is a super underrated pickup for this Blazers team. Between him and Ayton, one of those guys will be the center of the future, and apparently they might start both of them, which is kind of weird because neither one of them is a reliable shooter at this point. Maybe they plan on Ayton shooting a lot more threes, but I mean, hey, you've got nothing to lose. Again, it's the start of your rebuild. Maybe it does work, the double big thing out there, and they're able to make those two guys the power forward and center of their future, but at the very least, they've got a couple of bigs they can try out, see who works best, maybe eventually trade one of them to get even more assets into this team. Maybe one just eventually comes off the bench. I don't know. There's a lot of ways they could go with it, and I'm glad they've got a couple of bigs for this young core, especially for a guy like Scoot, who's immediately got some guys that can send him some big body screens, be lob threats, just operate on the inside, get him some second chance opportunities. I think those two guys could be big for Scoot's development and really just the play of this entire young team. Finally, in those deals, they got Mooney Camara, who's a second-round pick out of Dayton by the Suns this past year, who averaged 13.9 points per game and 8.6 rebounds as a 6'8" forward while shooting 36% from deep. He made all-conference this past season in his all-conference defensive team. He was really good at Dayton. He's a player that I admittedly don't know too much about. I haven't watched a ton of film of him outside of, again, looking at these stats and preparing for this video, but maybe he turns into something and could be looked at as one of the steals of the summer if he translates into a solid role player for this team. So yeah, as you can tell, this young core is pretty stacked. They've got a lot of really high potential young guys, some players that they're trying to make the most out of, find new potential in, like a DeAndre Ayton or Robert Williams, and that's all without even talking about the picks and the swaps that they also got in these deals. For example, the 2028 and 2030 Bucks pick swap and 2029 unprotected first, also from Milwaukee. Those picks and swaps come very far down the line. That's 5, 6, and 7 years away. And if we just talk about the 2029 pick, at that point, even if they're still in the Bucks, Dame will be 39, Brook Lopez will be 41, Chris Middleton will be 38, even Giannis will be 34 years old. There's a very realistic chance that at that point, most of those guys are retired, and if they are, the Bucks at that point probably aren't very good or just not at the championship contention level that they are now. So that could be a very valuable pick. Same thing with those 28 and 30 pick swaps, which again, guys are going to be really old. Portland, with the young core they have, I think they could be really good by that point, and all they have to do is be better than the Bucks to get value out of those swaps, which I think is very possible at that moment. The Celtics pick in 2029 is also interesting because that's the last year of Jaylen Brown's long-term contract that he just signed, and Tatum will probably be heading into the final years of this probable upcoming Supermax extension he's going to sign with the Celtics, so maybe one or both those guys is gone at that point. A lot changes in the league over 6 years. They could both be there, and the Celtics could still be really good, but again, you never know what could happen. At the very least, it's an interesting asset to hold on to. Additionally, they have almost all their own draft capital going forward, and some other tradable assets on the roster right now. A guy like Malcolm Brogdon, who could be moved before the season and could get them an asset as the reigning Sixth Man of the Year, who's an efficient scorer and a solid defender. There's a number of teams that I believe could really benefit from adding Brogdon. He's either going to be here and could be a solid guard mentor for those young guys, just come off the bench and play some solid minutes, or eventually they could deal him to, again, just further build up this war chest of assets. You've also got Jeremy Grant, who is making a lot of money. They gave him a 6-year, $150 million contract, which is a lot and is probably going to be tough to trade now, but as it continues to go on, and I think eventually that contract won't even look that bad with the salary cap continuously spiking, and Jeremy Grant just being a good player. It wouldn't surprise me at all if within the next year or so, some contending team is looking to move off some big salary and just improve their roster, adding a guy like Jeremy Grant in the process, and probably being willing to give the Blazers an asset or two as well. So yeah, that's the new situation that the Blazers are now in. If you ask me, I think this roster could be somewhat competitive on a nightly basis from day one. A potential lineup of Scoot, Simons, Grant, Rob, Ayton with Shaden Sharp coming off the bench, or some combination of those guys, is pretty talented. They've got some good defense between Ayton and Rob. Jeremy Grant out there too. Shaden Sharp showed some flashes. Matisse Thybulle was a great defender last year and has been the entirety of his career. Like, that team could be good defensively. If Simons improves offensively, Scoot's great from day one. They could be a really fun team on both sides of the ball. Now, if you ask me, are they going to make the play-in or the playoffs? No, I don't think so, but they're really well set up for the future. I think next season that's entirely realistic, and give them a few years where Shaden Sharp, Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons become one of the best 1-3s in ball. You've got Ayton and Rob, who maybe both get better as young, impactful bigs with the ability to pop. The draft capital they have, they could use to add more pieces. Just guys like Chris Murray, Rupert continue to get better. Like, this team could be really good in a few seasons. I really like what they've done over there in Portland. I think they did a great job of beginning this rebuild, getting themselves young talent. I'm just so glad they didn't commit to this thing further and traded the pick that they used to get Scoot for another all-star caliber player to put next to Dame. That team wasn't going to compete for a championship. I'm way more excited to watch this team right now than I would have been for that squad, or than I was for last year's team with Damian Lillard, Jeremy Grant, Yusuf Nurkic, all those guys. Really excited about the Blazers this upcoming season. I'm going to be watching a lot of their games. I already was because I like Scoot a lot, but now, especially with this young talent that they have, I'll be watching even more. I think they've got an extremely bright future ahead of them, that they're building something special, and eventually, not too far into the future, will be one of the better teams in the Western Conference. With all that being said, I appreciate y'all watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Comment down below, where do you think the Blazers finish in the standings this upcoming season? Do you agree with me that they're building something special here? Who do you think will be the best player from this young core? What do you think of the Damian Lillard trade returns? And everything like that. I want to continue to make videos breaking down some teams leading into the NBA season. So drop down below in the comments some teams that you want to see me break down. Also, probably next week, a full NBA season predictions video is going to be coming, as well as the return of After the Buzzer, the series where I recap NBA games. That'll be happening a couple of times, probably throughout the preseason. I've got a lot of fun stuff coming up. The NBA season is right around the corner. I cannot wait. When that gets here, probably daily NBA content will be returning. I think it's been like one every other day or every 2 days at this point, which hurts. I really like to make everyday content, so coming back soon. Make sure to look out for that. Really appreciate y'all's support over this offseason. It's been a big period of growth for the channel, and we're in for big things for this upcoming season. But for now, appreciate y'all watching as always. I will see you all later. Real one, say it back.